Hey guys, welcome to the Trade Genius Podcast. Bob and Phil here as always. Guys, major food shortage coming. Nobody saw this. We're going to talk about it today, so let's dive into this video.
Trade Genius.
Hey guys, I want to tell you something that we do that really will change the way in which you look at trading and also absolutely help you increase your profitability and how much money you make. It's the Trade Genius newsletter. We put the newsletter out Sunday night through Thursday night, and this really looks at the plumbing of the markets and helps prepare you for the next trading day and help you make money. And we give you a lot of information. We give you market statistics, we give you market levels, we give you the seasonality, what's happening with different sectors of the market, and we will help you identify whether the market's in a bear mode or a bull mode, or whether it's euphoric, whether it's despondent, and it just puts you in a position to be on the right side of the trade. So take advantage of our offer that we have below, and you'll love it. I mean, one trade that you make with this thing can pay for definitely a month, maybe even a year's worth of service. It's that powerful. Use promo code podcast for 15% off the retail price of newsletter. Thanks for listening.
Hey Bob, yeah, so all of a sudden now it seems like we're majorly out of rice. And I didn't see anything up until like recently until you showed me the article. So, what's going on with that?
Yeah, it actually started last year. The shortage didn't start last year. The problem started last year. And we had basically the monsoons in China and the rains in Pakistan basically devastated the rice growing regions of both those countries. And so now they're ready to harvest the rice, and they realize, whoa, this is going to be the lowest harvest we had in 20 years. And so it's going to put pressure on prices, number one. And number two, we're going to talk about an El Nino effect that's coming up. So this is going to be maybe a 2 or a 3 year problem. And you don't want to have a rice shortage around the world because so much of the world relies on rice. Right. And, for the United States, we're going to be immune to this, but the rest of the world desperately relies on it. So this is going to be a problem, Phil.
Yeah, I guess, the big impact, which is already an issue, is inflation, right? Because we have one more thing now. The last thing you need is, so inflation, part of it, there's two parts to that. Well, inflation, one is just an overabundance of dollar liquidity or money liquidity, depending on your country. The other one is supply side. And now we have both of those going on. And our food costs are already going up tremendously. And yeah, rice isn't as much of a staple in America, Hawaii more so, but that's more regional, probably West Coast too. But yeah, globally, very important food staple. And I think that's going to put more pressure on the central banks that are fighting the inflation battle. This is just one more thing. And, when we go back to the Fed saying higher for longer, I think you better believe them, Bob, because this is one of many things. And things are very fragile here too, right? A couple more things that go wrong and things can get out of hand pretty quickly.
Yeah, look, I mean, we talked about this for years. We said once the Fed has to deal with rising food and rising energy prices, they're cooked. Yeah. Pardon the pun. And because they can't fix it, because those two are they cause inflation, but they're a tax at the same time. And so it kind of screws up their models and they don't know what to do. And it really causes a bifurcation in people's spending. And it's just going to become just amazing. But it's not a 1 year thing. Because remember, we were reading an original article that said, well, maybe it's a 1 year thing. And then boom, the Philippine Times comes out and says, shoot, when we own an El Nino year, remember, we've had 3 years of La Nina, Phil. And so they've had really good growing seasons for rice in Asia and wheat in Australia. Don't forget, wheat in Australia is when we go to El Nino, Australia goes into a massive drought. So it's not going to just affect rice, it's going to affect wheat prices too. And you got Ukraine out there. One thing I should have did some more homework and I didn't. I know Ukraine and the war can affect wheat prices, but they also keep referencing Ukraine and rice. And I didn't know rice was a big growing commodity in that area. Maybe it is along the Caspian or the Black Sea. But I have to do a little bit more research on that because they reference Ukraine with that as well. I know in the U.S., we grow a lot of rice in California Central Valley, and we grow a lot of rice in the Mississippi Delta all the way up into Arkansas. So, the United States is going to be probably relatively immune to this problem, but it's going to raise prices throughout the world for food because most of the area that gets affected by El Nino gets affected negatively. Only the United States really gets a good guy with El Nino.
Yeah. And again, they're warning that the price of rice is going to go up. I remember this was an issue back in the 2000s. I remember, in fact, in Hawaii, you couldn't even get rice, for a while, or was very difficult to. When it did come in, there was there was usually like people waiting when the store opened to grab their bags of rice, and so we could run into that again. But again, for me and for what we do, I think food inflation is going to keep the pressure on the Fed to keep their stance going, and ultimately, I think that's going to drive down the price of equities.
Yeah, because look what's going to happen if you get to expend more of your dollars on living, I should say existing, you spend less money on living. And it takes out like 60-70% of the stock market is really in the United States is focused around living. And what I mean by living, it's the nice to have versus the have to have. And and the have to have stuff is low margin. People bitch and moan about energy prices. Well, the energy companies, if they get 8% margin, they're cooking, But if you're selling a Traeger grill and you've been throwing Keystone margins up on that thing, all of a sudden now you're discounting this stuff to nothing because nobody's buying your stuff. I walked through Home Depot yesterday, just ironically, and what is it, April? They're already discounting all the patio furniture, Phil. That stuff doesn't happen till like June, and you go out in front of those stores and it's just it's like wall-to-wall grills that aren't selling, and they're starting to discount those off too. So I think people are already pulling back quite hard, but they're going to be the stocks that are going to move up are all low margin. You're talking grocery stores like inflation, food production likes inflation, energy companies like inflation, but they're all low margin businesses. Companies like Microsoft and Google and Facebook or Meta, whatever you want to call it. All those guys are typically high margin business, but if people shift their spending patterns, it's going to devastate those companies too, because they're all just glorified retailers and they're glorified marketing ad agencies. And, you're going to see a pullback. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that. The Fed's not going to know what to do because they're going to get a crashing stock market and they're still going to get rising cost of living. Is not a good place to be.
No, not when you're trying to, it's like you're starting to win the battle and then one other thing pops up. You had an interesting chart though, because ultimately we want to talk about how to make, or at least maybe how we can position our portfolios. And I hadn't heard of this company, but it was KRBL. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, they export basmati rice out of India. So and I should say they're just a general exporting company. So keep an eye on KRBL. Look at that stock price. This is after the news came out, Phil. I mean, boom. And so I went out there. The rice commodity prices haven't moved too much yet, but keep an eye on KRBL because it's an issue. And also keep an eye on ADM. I own ADM long-term my account, primarily their food processor, but they also buy up their middleman. So they'll be buying up commodities here. And as commodity prices move up in this next inflation round, ADM is going to do well as well. So it's ADM. It trades in low to mid 80s. I have a target on it to the mid 115 area. So keep it on that. They're also a big ethanol player too. So those are the kind of stocks that I'm interested in. Take advantage of this. Remember, guys, we can't control this. So all we can do is control what we can, right? And so you want to get ahead of the inflation curve. And eventually, if general food prices go up, Phil, then you buy grocery stores too. But we just also bought another stock called BGS. They make processed frozen foods. So if you want to trade with us, this is stuff we look for all the time. And we have our algorithms, we have our filters, our sentinels that look for these opportunities. So remember, we may doom and gloom these podcasts, but we absolutely do it for a reason so that we can stay ahead of the crises and more importantly, profit from it. You want to win, okay? There's no sense being miserable with everybody else. And with that, Phil, all I have to say.
All right, awesome. Well, guys, tell us what you think. Were you aware that we were running out of rice? Let us know your thoughts on today's episode. And as always, we appreciate you watching. Please hit like and subscribe and smash that notification bell as well. We'll see you on the next video. Take care.
Trade Genius.